Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Good Pup webinar tonight, A New Dog in a Nutshell, the first 72 hours. My name is Lisa Martin Garlick, and I am the co-founder and COO here at Good Pup. And I'm here with Kate Hembry, our head of training. So many of the issues that owners encounter when bringing their new pups home happen in those first critical 72 hours when they're getting adjusted. And many of those can be addressed and or avoided with some simple tips and tricks that Kate's going to go through tonight. I know from experience, having gotten a puppy recently myself, Kate is very helpful in those first critical 72 hours for even the most experienced dog owner. And these tips will help you and your teams and your adopters to provide the best care for your dog. So super excited to do this. As a quick reminder, Good Pup is putting on this webinar. We are a service that connects dog owners to certified positive reinforcement dog trainers via video chat for training. Our goal and mission is always to provide quality science-based training, make it affordable and accessible to all dog owners. We started our initiative focused on shelters and rescues back in 2020 with the goal to really bring our training solution to help facilitate the most successful adoptions and fosters. So we love this program. We're super proud of it, and we're so excited that you're here. I'm going to hand this over to Kate now as an introduction. Kate, again, is our head of training and behavior here at Good Pup. She joined the Good Pup team 4 years ago, right at the very beginning, after spending 20 years working as both a CVT with a specialty in behavior and as a professional dog consultant. So she's also a Karen Pryor graduate, and we are in great hands. So I'm going to hand it over to Kate. Reminder, this is being recorded and will be distributed probably Monday of next week on our website. If during the course of the webinar you have questions, you can put them into the chat and or the Q&A, and I will ask Kate as appropriate, or at the end of the meeting, we will cover everything. Does that sound okay, Kate?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, so I'm going to hand it over to you. I will go on mute and video, but I will be here.
Great, thanks. Thank you for the intro, Lisa. Super excited to see everybody again. Very excited to get started with this webinar, and hopefully you guys will find it useful, not just for staffing, but for potential foster parents and potential adopters. So we are talking about New Dog in a Nutshell tonight, or the first 72 hours. And tonight our agenda is going to focus on a couple things. We're going to talk about preparation. How do we get prepared for bringing that new dog into the home? Acclimation. So what we want to do during this period to help them adjust with us. And we're going to look at two parts to this, really the home or the daily routine, and then how to start building that relationship with them. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about training on how to get started with the basics and some do's and don'ts that we recommend as far as how to help the process of the adjustment. So diving right in with our preparation part of our agenda, there's a couple things we want to think about when we're bringing home a new dog. The first thing is the age of the dog. So puppies are going to be different than our adult dogs. Puppies tend to be, depending on their age, of course, but tend to be more sponge-like. They're open-booked. They're pulling that information in. They're less sensitive, really, to what's happening around them, or they recover quicker. Our adult dogs, they come to us with a history, and even with the best preparations, that history is going to influence those preparations, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad. So we want to put more emphasis on our adult dogs and think about them a little bit more. Not that we don't want to emphasize our puppies, but we just want to take into consideration that history. Now, some of us might be thinking that there needs to be some differences bringing dogs into the home, whether they're coming in as a foster dog, maybe it's just a long-term care for a dog, for a friend's dog, or for a family member, or maybe we are adopting that dog. But really, helping them acclimate, it doesn't matter why they're coming into the home. They're still going to experience those same stresses in that first 72 hours, and they're still going to go through an acclimation process. So I think it's beneficial for all of those circumstances. We are going to talk about some specifics when it comes to preparation tonight. some things that I think we can do in advance, and also give ideas for all of those times when it's not in advance and we walk through and find that dog with the soulful eyes looking at us and decide to take them home. So the things we want to talk about specifically with preparation are going to be the transport, getting a little history on the dog when possible, getting our home set up, and then of course supplies. So let's talk about our transport to start with. I love this picture, right? This dog's having so much fun out the window. But there are some things we want to think about before we just throw that dog in the car and head home. Transportation in and of itself can be fairly stressful, especially if we have dogs that have never been in cars or maybe had a bad experience, and we might not even have those answers. So the first part we want to think about when preparing to bring a dog home is, what equipment are we going to need? Depending on the dog, are we going to want a crate available to help them travel safely, to help us be safe when driving? Are we going to need a seat belt or leashes to help our dogs be less mobile? Are we going to have gates up? Maybe we need someone helping us, assisting us with the dog in the car as well. So all things to consider. The other part of transportation is, what about supplies? What are we going to do to help our dog get in the car? Reinforce them for getting in the car. Be comfortable in the car. Do we need to have treats on hand? What about if our dogs get a little car sick, or maybe they're a little stressed and we have a minor accident? Do we need some towels? Do we need some cleaning supplies? Maybe a trash bag. We want ourselves to be comfortable too, transporting our new dog home. Assistance, I already mentioned this. So it may behoove you, depending on the dog you're bringing home, to have a person who can actually sit in the back seat with the dog. That may help the dog feel more comfortable. It may put everybody, make the whole situation safer. You may also need some assistance from someone in the kennel environment or the shelter environment, right, who the dog knows, to help get the dog ready for transport. They may be a little apprehensive if they haven't met you and they don't know the vehicle, which really leads me into familiarity as another way we can start to help prepare that transport for being successful. And so helping a dog feel comfortable would also mean having things around them that are familiar. If the rescue, if the shelter, whomever you're working with is open to it, if there's any bedding or blankets or towels, it could even be a rag that smells like the dog and the environment they've been in, and bringing that with them, that may also help soothe them in the car as well. So another thing to consider. And certainly we could always donate a blanket or towel back. And lastly, I'm just going to add, and I'm going to use the old Monopoly saying for those of us who used to play the game, do not pass go. Go straight, in this case, not to jail, but home. I have heard so many stories, and years ago when I worked at our local rescue, the people pick the dogs up, they get them last minute, and they want to run the errands for things they need. Honestly, we really want to avoid those quick errands. We want to make this transport short, easy as possible for our dogs, so we can get them home and start decompressing there. And we want to use other resources if we need some errands run. So something to consider. Other things we want to consider when we're preparing to bring a dog into our home is the history. This may be easy to get in some cases. It may not be in others, but I do think there are some key points that we can find out about our dogs from the environment that we're bringing them home from. Personality traits would be one to start. Certainly someone, volunteers, staff members, have observed the dogs. How did they respond to them? How were they when people walked by their kennel area? Did anybody observe how they responded if kids came to visit? How did they eat? Secluded by themselves in the back, slowly, quickly? Did they play with their food bowls? Did they chew things up in their kennel? Did they shred their bedding? All things that would be good to know before we got them home. What about playtime? What did he look like when he was doing that? So we want to consider that as well, and certainly get as much information as we can. Schedule is something we also think about quite a bit. And I think a lot of us think about our schedule at home as far as helping our dogs, but I would encourage you to explore the schedule of the environment that our dogs are coming from. What time do they get there in the mornings? What time do the lights go on? What time did they feed them? Did they let them out first or feed them after and feed them after? Did they feed them before? Were there scheduled times for walks, or did they walk whenever? What time did they eat in the afternoon? What time was lights out? If you can find out as much as you can about their schedule, and at least for those first 72 hours, you get the dog home, set your schedule to coincide as much as possible with that. It will help your dog feel more comfortable. So just like us, if we know what's about to happen, if we know what to expect, and we're not going to be as worried or as stressed. And by having a familiar schedule, that will help our dog's stress level as well. Dog mates, did we have play sessions? If so, who did they play with? What were the dogs like? Were they tall dogs, small dogs, skinny dogs, fluffy dogs, black dogs, yellow dogs? They can have specific dogs they enjoy more than others. They can also have specific dogs they dislike more than others, just like us. So again, good information to have if we have that available to us. And then lastly, and we may not have this information on hand, but we do want to ask why. Do we know why he was at the rescue or the shelter? Was he a stray that was picked up by animal control? Was he running the streets? Where was he found? Was he surrendered by a family? Do we know anything about the family? Did they have children? Do we know the reason they surrendered him? We might not have much of this information, but any information is better than nothing and is going to, again, influence how we set up our own structure and our own home routine with our dogs to help them feel more comfortable so they can acclimate faster. Another part of being prepared for our dogs is how we're going to set up the home when we get them there. Now, again, we might have just taken this dog on a whim and not thought through this a little bit, but hopefully for most of us, we thought through it. And I know many facilities now actually require like a 24-hour hold period, so people do think about it. And these are things we want to be thinking about. You want to strategize where you're going to have things in your home. Where the food bowl is going to be, where's the water bowl is going to be, where are we going to put their bed? If we have other pets, do we need to move them temporarily? These are things to consider. Are they going to be eliminating inside the home on potty pads? Or are they going to be eliminating outside the home? Where is the elimination area going to be outside? What door will we come through? What about dog proofing your home? Are there certain parts of your home you're not going to want your new friend at? We have a fancy carpet somewhere and we want to keep them out of that area. Or maybe we don't want them in the kids' rooms that, at least for my kids, never tend to be picked up completely, right? There's always something on the floor for my dog to grab. Or what about the bathrooms? All things we want to consider. And how about house rules? What are we going to let our dog do in the home? Are we going to let them on the couch? Or are they not going to be allowed on the couch? They have to be on the dog bed. Where are they gonna sit when we're having dinner? Will they be in the crate or will they be beside us? Getting everybody on board in the family and keeping it consistent so the dogs are not confused, again, is just gonna help lower that stress level and help our dogs. Lastly, think about any potential dangers in your home, right, that we don't wanna expose our dogs to. So trash, cleaning supplies, grills. A lot of people don't think about that and the waste that comes off of our grills. Other things you might want to consider are electrical outlets. These might be areas we need to, again, strategize to prevent our dog from going in, or at least until we are familiar with them, know them, and trust them a bit. Other thing to be prepared for is supplies. So I think that probably most of us who have had dogs have a variety of supplies on hand we can access. But there are those times when we just don't have them, and there are things we want to make sure we have that are going to help our transition be smoother. Leashes for sure. If we don't have leashes, hey, rescues have them all over, and most of them are very willing to let us borrow them. Management options is going to be huge. Gates, doors, X-pins, what do we have available? If we don't have those, what can we use? Chairs turned over sideways, furniture that can be moved. We want to think through this a little bit as well, as far as how we're going to use things at home to prevent our dog. And then what about ID tags? Not something to easily come by all the time. Maybe we need to find a way to put some duct tape with a name and phone number on the collar temporarily until we get them. Toys, get creative. If you've got children, at least like I do, I know there are things they do not play with, stuffed animals, that I can certainly add to that, add to the list of toys. And then there's tons of do-it-yourself now toys available. Old socks can be braided, wetted down, frozen for tug ropes. Water bottles, plastic water bottles are a great enjoyment for many dogs. Shredding things like old towel paper holders. So a lot of stuff on hand in the home can be used. Of course, bowls. We can find bowls that we can let our dogs drink and eat out of temporarily until we get what they need. And food. What do we have for food? If we have dog food on home, or if we don't have dog food, we could certainly have asked the rescue for some of that dog food, right, to come home with. Whether that would help us if we don't have any. And if we do have any, we're going to want to mix it into the diet to help their gastrointestinal system adjust as well. And I do want to add, I see a lot of great stuff coming through in the chats here. Somebody brought up plants as far as preventing our dogs from access to them. There's a lot of household plants that are toxic. A lot of people don't think about that. And then someone also mentioned great info on foster dog, that they have labels that they hand out that they can switch around between the dogs for IDs, which is a terrific idea as well. Okay, so all of that said, there's tons of stuff that we can do to be prepared. And of course, as someone's adding, I'm reading you guys as I go, so bear with me. Knowing if you don't have a local vet, where's your 24-hour vet? Where's your closest one if you have a problem? So great information. And of course, hopefully most of us are able to think through these things before we get our dogs home, but we can do much if we haven't. Now, let's talk specifically about helping our dogs acclimate in the home. For me, I'm going to focus on our daily routine or our home routine. I think that that's a big one we tend to overlook, and the importance behind that. And then we're going to also talk about different things we can do in the home to start building that relationship. When we do talk about acclimation, we talk about bringing our dog home for the first time. The one thing I highly recommend is we do not want to have a welcome party for our dog, which is why I put this picture up here. I know for many of us, we're excited. We've got that new family friend. We want to enjoy them. We want our friends to meet them, right? This can go badly on so many scenarios. Your dog does not know what they're walking into. And so we want to avoid this from happening. And even if you know this dog a bit from the shelter, we don't know how they're going to be in your home. And so those are things to keep in mind. Now, as far as we're gonna go for our home routine, there's a couple of specific points here or specific things I want to talk about. We've already mentioned some of these with some of our ideas. Schedule, feedings, sleeping areas, eliminations, enrichment, getting that good behavior, and being home alone. So let's talk about let's talk about all those. Let's start with our schedules. We've talked about how incorporating the schedule at home that's similar to the environment of where the dog is coming from can be very helpful as far as helping them adjust in the home. That can be having the feedings at the same time. And you want to consider too on your feedings, and we'll talk about this too with the feedings, do we want to feed them once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day? Knowing when we're feeding our dog is going to influence our eliminations, because most dogs need to use the bathroom after they've eaten. So we're going to want to cater our elimination schedule around those feeding times. And then additionally, also think about how often the dogs need to be taken out in addition to those feeding times. Every dog will be different. Some dogs will be coming to the home with no house training skills. Some dogs will be puppies, and they may not be able to hold their bladder for extended period of times. And some dogs may have house training skills, but they may not actually understand your house training, right? So your house may be different than where they've trained before. So keep that in mind. I do generally recommend my young adult dogs that if I think they have some kind of house training, I will start them at a 2-hour time frame interval for taking them out to use the bathroom. You can always shorten this. Accidents are most likely going to be inevitable in this first 72 hours because you're getting to know your dog. And you can always also make that time frame longer as well with your dog if they're doing well with it. So keep that in mind. Puppies will need to have a shorter interval of time. And we're going to talk more about dogs that have learned to just release their bladder and bowel whenever they feel full. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. Exercise, very important for our schedule as well. When are we going to be walking our dogs? So we want to keep up to date with that. Lisa, you're a little bit ahead of me. Sorry, I'm trying to talk fast. And then we also want to take into account naps and resting times with our dogs. So we want to incorporate a balance of schedule of things to do with our dogs. They don't need and we don't want to entertain them constantly, right? We want an appropriate amount of exercise, enrichment, and rest, as well as then our feeding and elimination times. Now, our feedings, we already mentioned a couple things. So time and frequency, when are we going to feed them? How often are we going to feed them? And you may want to consult with your vet, and or if there's a vet on staff at the facility you're bringing your dog home from, as far as how frequently they're feeding or what their recommendations are for their dog. You do want to think about location of the feeding. Where are they going to eat? And if you have a multi-dog household, we highly recommend that they're not eating with the other dogs. Certainly not at this point. I recommend it all the time. But initially, when we get that dog home, we want to find an area that is quieter, away from traffic, that our dog can eat comfortably. And it won't be abnormal if the dog doesn't eat right away. They may not be comfortable. It may take a little bit of time. And sometimes our dogs require us to stand there with them and eat to just provide a little bit of security. And that's something we can work on and move away from, again, as we get to know them. We talked about the diet switch, very important, right? It's going to influence our gastrointestinal tract. So instead of going cold turkey from one type of food to another, if we can have some of the food they've been eating and bring it with us, that will slowly mix it in. That will make things a lot easier. And I'm going to add this last comment, which we'll dive in a bit more when we talk about our resource guarding. We want to avoid direct removal of food items at this time. And what that means is I want to give my dog an opportunity to eat and an opportunity to walk away. And when they walk away, I can pick up the food. Or if they're not walking away, then I want to encourage them to leave the area. Maybe I use a treat and then I pick up that bowl. But what I don't want to do is be picking up the bowl if they're still eating or if they're still sitting beside that bowl. We want to avoid that because that can cause stress. Our dogs could be conflicted about you taking something from them, and that can send us spiraling a bit down the road of resource guarding, which is not where we want to be. Now, sleeping is another thing we want to keep in mind when we're or think about with our dogs. We want to think about the location we want our dog to be sleeping. Is it dog proof? Is it safe? Is it cozy? Is it quiet? Can we provide familiar scents for them as they get to know us? That can be our scents. If we've brought familiarity from the rescue or shelter, that would be great to put in there with them. We do not recommend that we put dogs in locations for sleeping that are not habited by the family. So garages or basements are not ideal, laundry rooms. You want them to be with you. You're connecting, you're building a bond with them. Crates are a great idea for dogs to sleep in, a terrific way to provide safe and secure environment, and we can also use it as a management tool. And it's a great way for my dogs too, if I've established that location and have that crate, they're gonna be exhausted that day when they come home. That first night, it's a perfect opportunity to have them in the crate and help them make a positive connection with it because they should sleep well. That being said, if I have a dog who's apprehensive about going into the crate, if he is worried about it, if he balks at going in, maybe he won't even approach it, or he goes in and runs right back out, then we need to do a little work. That dog is not ready to go into that crate for the night, and we will cause more trauma if we put them in, even if it's for the night, even if the crate is right next to us. So when we see that happen, we need to come up with an alternative. We need to find an area that's dog proofed for our dogs that they can be. Maybe this is an X-pin, maybe it's a gated off area, maybe in the right setting, if it's safe, they could even be on a tether. And then that's when we want to start over the next 72 hours, really working on some crate training, playing some crate games to help them develop a positive connection to that crate. So tossing treats in, rewarding for the dog going in with treats, playing a game of fetch with them fetching toys in and out of the crate, starting to feed them around, near, inside the crate, leaving treasures of treats for them to find in the crate, right? So we want to start to work with them and get them comfortable. And then once they're ready, we can start to have them in the crate, close that door for short periods of time and then longer and longer periods of time, right? So if dogs love their crate, it's a great resource. I know Lisa mentioned she has a puppy. His crate is his favorite place to be. He puts himself to bed. If he is tired during the day, he goes in there and sleeps with the door open. So it can be very helpful. But there's also times when we don't want that crate, right? So while we can crate train dogs, if on getting our history taking, we've learned anything about this dog involving separation distress, separation anxiety, isolation issues, crate distress, we don't want to be using a crate. Those dogs do much better with alternative styles of management. So small rooms with gates, small rooms with closed doors, X pens. Those are the areas we want to be working on, and we want to be training them to be comfortable in there instead. And we can use the exact same games we are using for our crate for those rooms and spaces as well. So do keep that in mind when taking those dogs home. And we don't always know, we don't always have that history, but I guarantee you'll be able to tell as your dog approaches the crate. And we're going to talk more about how we want to observe and learn from our dogs, getting to know them with their body language. But right now we're going to talk about our elimination and our walks with our dogs. So we've already talked a little bit about this, but management and supervision is going to be huge when we bring home a new dog. Remember that they're going to be a little bit not a little bit, probably a lot overwhelmed coming in. And so we want to use baby gates, tethers, crates, the umbilical approach of having the dog attached to us for supervision to ensure that we are preventing our dog from ideally having that opportunity to have an accident in the home. And then in addition to that, we also want to have a plan for when accidents do happen. And this means we want to just really ignore them, right? Accidents, as I said, are going to happen. That's just the likelihood of that first 72 hours because you're getting to know this dog and they're getting to know you. And they don't know everything. They don't know the door they need to go out. They don't necessarily know where their elimination area is. Maybe it is inside. Maybe they don't know how to tell you they have a full bladder if they were house trained before. So when our dogs have accidents, we don't need to make a big deal. We just want to clean it up and revamp our schedule and our management so that we prevent them from having another elimination in the house. We may need to shorten our time frame as well. The other thing is it's really important that using our management and our supervision, right, that we end up ideally outside with our dogs when they do have a full bladder or for a full colon.
Oh, Kate, we lost your volume for a minute.
They have a full bladder. If they feel pressure, they just relieve themselves, right? And same with the colon. Those dogs are going to take a lot more management. They're going to have to have a pretty rigid plan that we're going to need to work on with them. It's going to take a much longer period of time for them to make the connection. Oh, my bladder's full. I need to be outside. So we want to really work to have patience with those dogs and focus on how we can help prevent the accidents while ending up outside at opportune times we can reward them. Okay. I know I've heard a lot of people say, and I've said myself at times, you know, if you catch a dog having an accident, because ideally they're going to be under the direct supervision, you could gently interrupt them and then take them to the elimination area and have them finish. I want to caution anyone taking home a rescue dog with this, and really any dog, but as gentle as it can be, it can actually reverse your house training goals. Unfortunately, for the dog doesn't know you, right? And so even no matter how nice you make it, coming up, that dog could interpret that interaction as scary or as a punishment from you, but they don't even know why because they're just doing what's normal. And this is going to break down the bond you're trying to start to get established. And it's also going to confuse my dog and not help show them where we want them to go. So just keep that in mind when you're working with these dogs. Walks are a terrific way to provide exercise, but also our eliminations. And one of those things we can put in our schedules. And if we know dogs are walked at a certain time, generally at the rescue, one of those things we could try to coordinate with that. I want to, again, encourage you on walks, right? This is the first 72 hours. We're trying to let our dogs decompress and acclimate. So walks need to be short, 5 to 10 minutes. We want them to be in quieter times of the day, in areas where there's probably low traffic. We can take multiple walks, but this is about getting to know them, right? And we'll slowly build up time frame as we do get to know them on the walks. But right now, it should just be an enjoyment as much as possible and giving your dog the opportunity to smell and get to know their area. We want to also avoid other dogs and unfamiliar people right now on walks because we don't know their history and we don't know exactly how they'll respond. And I can't help them either if I don't know them very well. So let's get to know them first and focus on that relationship with you. Enrichment, another big part of our daily routine. Mental stimulation helps keep our dogs busy. And then if they're busy doing that, they're not looking for that enrichment in other areas, potentially offering those behaviors we don't want. So it helps deter those unwanted behaviors. Mental enrichment can also provide some form of physical exercise as well. And when we have things that they have to interact with toys, they actually have to think about, then their mind is thinking, and we want to promote that as well. A thinking mind can't be operating at the same time that I have an emotional or over aroused brain working. So interactive toys work great. That's the dogs having to turn items to get certain pieces of food out, or certain toys out of them. And then lastly, we certainly can play with our dogs. What a great bond building experience that would be. But we want play to be very structured, right? We want to set those guidelines right now. This is not the time to be doing the rough and tumble play or the wrestling or chase games. We want things to be calm. We want to say, hey, I will throw the ball for you. You bring it back. You drop it and I'll throw it again. Or I'll play tug with you, but if your mouth touches my hands, I'm going to drop the toy and I'm going to walk away. Setting that expectation right now is going to set you guys up better for future success with your relationship and with that enrichment. I noted too, someone put in chat a great thing on the canine enrichment. There's a Facebook group and they are terrific. Definitely check them out. We also did a webinar on enrichment as well with a ton of good ideas. Please feel free to check that out as well. It is free to our rescue partners. Okay, promoting good behavior. Other thing we want to do during our daily routine, I think as people, we get caught up in worrying about all the behaviors we don't want. But really what we want to be doing is using management and supervision to prevent those behaviors. We want to limit their freedom initially so that they're not overwhelmed. And then we want to focus on rewarding the good behaviors. One of my favorite games to play, and I continue to recommend, is the Smart by 50, invented by Kathy Sadeo. This is a terrific game. You count out 50 pieces of kibble, in the morning. And then because we're providing such strict management and limited freedom, we should have supervision on our dogs. Every time we observe them doing something we like, chewing on the right bone or playing with the right toy or sleeping on the side comfortably, we want to drop a treat nonchalantly at their feet, right? And it's our goal to find 50 good things to reward them for. Again, you're shaping the dog you want in your home. And then lastly, when we talk about that daily routine, we do want to start putting into our plan some ideas for our dogs being home alone, right? It's inevitable that at some point we are going to leave and our dogs will be home alone. I know for many of us, we work from home now, which is terrific. We travel, we take our dogs everywhere, but there are going to be those times that they're going to need to be without you. And so we want to go ahead and set them up for success and incorporate some of these tactics into our daily routine. Independence training would be terrific. Independence training or exercises is about helping your dog get engaged with toys that they would like. Food toys, Kongs work great for this, Chewies, but they're busy doing something on their own. And you actually work to start to move around in and out of the room, go to different areas of the house, always coming back to them while they're engaging. But we want them to learn that they can have fun by themselves. So that's really important. The other thing we want to think about is, are we going to be using a crate if we exit the home, or are we not going to be crating? And this, of course, is going to come down to our dog. Are they comfortable and familiar with the crate? The crate is terrific if our dog likes it and they can use it. Guess what? We should still be practicing independent exercises inside the crate. So our dogs get comfortable being alone, doing their own thing inside the crate. And for our dogs who are not going to use that crate, right, that have a history, again, we want to be practicing independent exercises in their dog-proof safe areas where we can leave them for short periods of time if we have to, because this is the first 72 hours and we don't want to be leaving them for a very long period of time, if at all, if we can help it. Also, we can do training, actually work with training with our dogs home alone. Training includes, or the type of training that I normally recommend is the dog actually becoming familiar with you exiting the home and the cues you use to exit the home. Again, this is not a dog that has a history of separation distress or separation anxiety related behaviors. This is a dog that is just getting to know us. And we're saying, hey, when I exit the home, when I pick up my keys, I always come back. So I start this very small. I might pick up my keys, walk to my door, don't do anything, don't open it, turn around, come back, drop my keys, go about my business. I don't even make a big deal with my dog. If I pick up my purse, I might do it with my purse. Or maybe I just walk to the door. And I will repeat this until my dog really isn't paying any attention to me. And then I might start to open the door and then close the door. Eventually, I'm going to step through the door and right back inside. And then eventually I'm going to step out of the door for a couple seconds and come back. And then I'm going to slowly extend that time frame. And again, it's not like we're having to work up to an extended period of time here. What we are working on is your dog learning the concept that when I pick up my keys and I grab my purse and I leave, I come home to you. Okay, so that's a real important part I think a lot of people miss. Other thing I want everybody to think about is noise. Most of our dogs coming in, whether they're foster or we've adopted them, they've just left an environment that's probably pretty loud with other dogs, with other people moving through, with constant things happening. And suddenly, if I'm left home alone and it's quiet, that can be quite traumatic. So I would, again, encourage you guys to play background noise. This could even be noise similar to dogs barking, like a kennel environment. And then slowly over time, as we know our dog's doing well and adjusting to our home, we can turn that volume down. So all things to consider during our daily routine. Now, let's dive into the acclimation part of our relationship building. Couple things here we're going to cover: our 3-3-3 rule, committing time, body language, socialization, exposure, and interactions. So starting with our 3-3-3 rule, and I suspect many of you on the line tonight are familiar with this or have heard of this rule. But the 3-3-3 rule, for those of you who don't know, it's a general rule of thumb or a guide to help set guidelines for us, a time frame of what's appropriate to expect for our dogs adjusting in our home, for the rescue dogs adjustments. The first 3 is 3 days, hence the first 72 hours. That's what this webinar is talking about. And during these 3 days, dogs are going to be overwhelmed, uncomfortable. They're not going to be themselves. It's not abnormal for them not to eat or drink or maybe even not eliminate. They might be quiet, they might hide, they might be really ecstatic and very hyper and rambunctious. But they're settling in. And a lot of what we're talking about tonight is ways we can help them. During the next 3 is for 3 weeks. That's the first 3 weeks that rescues with you. That's really when they start to settle in and feel more comfortable. It's also when we'll start to see some of those behaviors we might not necessarily want coming out because they're comfortable enough to let their true selves out. And our next webinar in May is going to focus on that 3 weeks and some of those unwanted behaviors or unexpected behaviors we might see. And then the last 3 is for 3 months. And that's really kind of the average time, the general rule of thumb, for a rescue to find that sense of security with your home, to understand their routine, their new lifestyle, and to feel comfortable. And of course, for each individual dog, this will be different. They're not a one size fits all. So sometimes it will be shorter and other dogs, it will be longer. But this is about us as adopters, us as foster parents, and us as coaches of people who have taken rescues, being able to help these new parents understand the process. And that will help them set their expectations appropriately. So again, during those first 3 days, we want to make sure we are limiting freedom, that we have that constant supervision happening. This is all an important part. We want to really avoid public places right now. And those public places include our dog parks and grooming as well. I know for many of us, we get those dogs home and we want them to have a bath, but I'm going to encourage you guys to hold off and just deal with the reality that the house might smell shortly, because getting a bath can be very traumatic. So we just want to take some time to get to know them and then do a bath a little bit later. Unless, of course, we have a health concern and something has to be addressed sooner, then we may not have an option. Okay, so other things, and I've already brought this up, I really want to encourage anyone taking new rescue to commit time to your dog. Get them on a Friday so you have the weekend, or take a couple days off, right? Take some time away from your normal life so that you can get to know them and they can get to know you. This is a time for them to decompress. We want them to explore the house. We want them to learn the rules. We can do safaris and let them smell new places and things.
Kate, your audio lost. Your video is moving again. Talk for me.
Okay, am I back?
You're back.
Okay, can you please advance the slide to what goes on there?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. I live in the mountains of rural North Carolina and the internet likes to come and go. But we're going to be working on getting them comfortable with their feedings. And all of this is helping us get to know our dog. And lastly, our dog getting to know us, right? So this is about knowledge, right? We want to take this time for all of this to happen so our dogs get to know us. All right, the next thing as far as helping build that relationship, aside from committing time, is going to be body language. We need to get to know our dogs. How do they communicate? So as far as dogs, we all know that they communicate with body language. We have several webinars, actually 2 webinars, I think, on body language. Again, you guys can access it on our website. I've only included a couple pictures here on body language, but I want to encourage you with this time off you're taking in this first 72 hours that you watch and observe your dog. How do they respond when you interact with them? What do they look like? Do they yawn a lot? Do they turn away? Do they run up happily with their mouth open and their tail hanging out? What do they do? What do you think they look like if they're stressed, right? Are they stretching? Are they cowering? Are they not approaching you? These are things that are going to help you get to know your dog, but also allow you to prevent situations from happening that could break down that relationship and promote the situations we do want. So really take that time to get to know them. Next, as far as continuing to build that relationship, of course, we want to talk about socialization and exposure with our dogs. One thing I want to clarify here is that the behavior of our dogs, the social behavior of our dogs, does change and follow their developmental periods, just like us as humans. And socialization refers to a specific time frame in that developmental period of dogs being 8 to 16 weeks, and some people would say 8 to 14 weeks of age, okay? And that's that time frame when they're puppies and they're sponges and they're open to things and they're just not as sensitive. So we don't have to be as cautious, right? Not that we're not going to be cautious, but we don't have to worry about it as much. But most of our rescues we're taking home, these are adults. They've got a history. We might not know that history. So we really want to approach this positively with exposures when we're getting them out and about. And at this point, right, it's our 72 hours. We're not necessarily taking them to public places, but we are going to be maybe sitting outside on our porch, or maybe it's just about exposing them to the washer or the dryer. I know for me, my new rescue, petrified of our HVAC unit when the heat would kick on, and I had to really work with her on it, or she'd run and hide in the house. So exposing them positively is going to be doing things slowly, starting at a distance away from things that the dog can actually respond and eat some treats so that they can make a positive connection. And then slowly over time, we can decrease that distance, or we could increase the intensity of what we're exposing to. Maybe it's just the time frame. But we do want to understand there's a difference between the two, and we want to work to develop an appropriate plan based on the dog you're bringing home, so that they, again, can have those positive experiences we want and set ourselves up for success. Okay, Other thing we want to talk about with acclimation is our interactions with our dogs and with other people, right? Very important. So, of course, the first thing we're going to do is have them meeting the family. Keep this in mind that this is going to set the stage for how they're going to greet other family members and potentially non-family members down the road. So we want it to be as positive as possible. Ideally, it should be in a large space outside where the dog doesn't feel confined and doesn't end up conflicted. At the very least, let them explore outside so that they are comfortable and calm before we go inside the home. Space is really key. And once we are actually inside the home, or even if we're meeting the people outside, we want to let the dog do the greeting themselves. Okay, give them the opportunity to go up and say hello. The person can drop treats to them, making that positive connection as well. And then the dog's allowed to go and do their own thing. If we're at all concerned, we of course can keep our dog on a leash for safety as well in those areas. Now, another interaction we need to consider are children. Hopefully, if the dog has come home with the family, that the kids were already there meeting the dog. That would be our goal. I know for many rescues, this is now policy, and I love this. But in the cases it isn't, and we've just taken the dog that's tugged at our heartstrings, the first place we want to start is coaching our kids. How do we want them to interact? What they should and shouldn't do with the dog, right? Where should they pet the dog? Should they reach right over their head? No, let's have them pet them at the side, on their shoulder. Let's make sure they understand the dog needs to come up to them, that they're not running at the dog. Let's make sure that they're not hugging and kissing our dog, right? These are all important things to coach our children on as well. For dogs, kids can be super scary. They're very different. Their mannerisms, everything they do is different. Also, we want to make sure we have direct supervision. When we do this, we want to have a very similar process for the rest of our family, like we did with the rest of the family, meeting outside if possible, but larger spaces, making sure our dogs are calm before we let them go and greet. But for children, direct supervision means we should really have an adult for the kid and an adult for the dog, okay? So that if something doesn't go the way we want, we can move both away quickly. And I will go over again with all these processes, and especially with kids, slower the better. Some dogs, they might not need to meet that kid face to face in that first 24 hours. Maybe they need 48 hours to decompress. Maybe they need to be behind a gate at a distance where they can just observe the child, and the child can toss them treats and talk to them so the dog becomes more comfortable. Other interactions we want to consider are our non-family interactions. Again, think about how this is going, how we set this up is going to be how we set it up really for our dog for the rest of their life, okay? Now, first 72 hours, we're not going to be doing ideally any of this. That is my recommendation. I know lots of people don't like to listen. So again, we want to coach them on being outdoors in big spaces, allowing our dogs to come up to people. Now, this is assuming that our dogs are comfortable with people. If we're going to do it in the house, I do tend to set it up a little bit differently. I will generally, after I've given it time for my dog to suggest, I'll actually have my dog in a safe place so that they're up when my guests come into the house, those non-family members. And I want my dog to be calm first before I bring them out. And this really can apply to any dog, dogs that jump for attention, dogs that are very mouthy when they greet people, dogs that are worried and shy. Any dog with that kind of history, or maybe we just don't know the history, this can again become the normal routine for the dog. So setting them up in a safe place, bringing them out on leash, and again, giving the dog the opportunity to approach on their own and having that person drop treats on the floor to make that positive association, right? This whole process becomes familiar to my dogs. It will go faster and faster. And because they understand this is the expectation, this is what happens, this is what we do, they will be calmer. Okay. Now, certainly if we have dogs with a history of fear specifically to people or who have shown any kind of aggression, those I want to encourage that they're meeting with a trainer and developing a very specific desensitization and counter conditioning plan to greeting non-family members. So keep that in mind. Okay, interactions with animals. We do want to talk about that a little bit. For me, I think this is a big one. We recently did a study here with some of our rescue partners at Good Pup. And what we found with some of the dogs that were being returned after being adopted, one of the biggest concerns was that the interaction with the animals at home did not go well the first time. And so I think this is a big area we can really coach people on to go well and have a positive experience. And then that way, everybody is set up for success, and hopefully we've found a forever home for this dog. So for dogs, we want them greeting in a neutral area, right? Neutral areas do not happen in homes. Neutral areas need to be outside of the homes. I mean, it could be just outside the home. It doesn't have to be far, but bringing a dog into the home is really, it's very challenging to set that situation up where it's going to end on a positive note. What I personally like to do is take parallel leash walks with the dogs so that the dogs are at a distance from each other on leash walking. If it's just you in the home, have a friend come over and walk your other dog. And the dogs can look at each other, and as they're calming down and giving appropriate signals, again, you're going to be watching their body language and observing, you can start to walk them closer. And once they're closer, we can have very brief introductions. We don't want to stand there and observe too long, 1 to 2 seconds. And we want to, hey, come here, buddy, move them away. And then we can let them greet again, and we can slowly start to extend those interactions. And then we can walk in the house together. That's the perfect world. I know a lot of rescues will let you guys actually do meet and greets at the shelters. And so that can be a neutral territory as well to try it out. Sometimes we can do meet and greets through fencing. In worst case scenario, if I do have a dog that I'm going to have to do it in the house, I'm going to find the largest area. And again, this is probably a situation where they're not going to greet in that first 24 or 48 hours. I'm going to use some gates, and I'm going to use some management to prevent direct greetings, and I'm going to allow them to just see each other and get to know each other. I see some people putting in the 7 to 10 day separation of new pets, which is great. But the slower the introduction, the better it's going to go for you and your dog, the dog you've got and the dog you're bringing home. And that also goes for our cats, right? So let's talk a little bit about our cats. Of course, you can use, people have a variety of pets. So they may be introducing the new dog to a bird, hopefully not directly, but they may have ferrets, they may have rabbits. There's all kinds of pets available out there. The slower you go with any animal is going to be better. And I do recommend that most animals, especially smaller animals than the dogs, are kept separated for a reasonable period of time. I see people putting in 7 to 10 days, which is great. I would recommend at least through that 72 hours until you've got to know your dog and the body language. During this time frame, you can actually do scent trading. So you can have various things that are from the cat's area where they're being kept, and it can go into the dog's area, and dog stuff can go into the cat area so they can smell each other and start to get to know each other. I will actually keep doors closed, and I make sure my cat's in a separate safe area. And then as the dog's becoming more comfortable with the scent and my cat's becoming more curious, I will open doors, but I put gates up, and I will have them at distances from each other where they can see each other, but they're eating, right? And so making that positive connection. And again, this is about your cat. Really, for the cats, you want to let them make the decision to start the process and to end the process. So if the cat starts to eat and then they walk away, we're done with that session, right? And as my cat gets more comfortable, I can bring my dog a little closer until maybe they're smelling on other sides of the gates. Once I do feel comfortable enough to let my cat come out, and again, every cat will be different. Some cats are more dog savvy than others. I'm always going to make sure I've set up safety guidelines for both my cat and my dog. So the dog's going to be on the leash, and my cat's going to have areas they can run to if they need to move away quickly. And for me personally, it's generally months. It's that 3-month interval of watching and the animals getting to know each other before there's ever any off leash. And it's still at that point, I'm not even 100%. I would go unsupervised. It takes a long time. I want to be very confident in both the animals I've introduced, or all the animals I've introduced, they are comfortable together and that they know how to read each other and understand each other and respect each other's space. Okay, so that was a little bit on interactions with animals. I love what's coming through the chats. Bear with me, guys. I'm trying to read the chats as well as talk about some of this. I do want to briefly touch on our training before I run out of time. So basic training, resource guarding, separation stress, leash reactivity. I chose those three, because those seem to be what we see as the most common issues for dogs coming out of shelters. So as far as the basics go, when it comes to training, we want to keep in mind that first 72 hours, we want to be really proactive. And that comes down to our management and to making sure that we have supervision of our dogs and that they are, we are preventing those unwanted behaviors. What we don't want to do is overload our dogs. Lisa, if you can go ahead and advance that next slide. So sometimes I think we get very excited, right? We want to teach them all this new stuff, but remember, they've got a lot they're taking in. And so if I start teaching them all these things on top of the fact that they don't even understand the daily routine or what their lifestyle is, that can be very hard on them. So keep that in mind. We do want all of our training to be positive reinforced. So we want to have those things those dogs enjoy so that they're making a positive connection to the training and building a positive connection with you and enjoying, like building that bond with you, starting that bond. And then lastly, of course, we want all training to be slow and steady. Don't push too far, okay? Get to know what your dog knows, work with it. That will help them feel comfortable if you're practicing cues they've already learned and showing them they can do this in this new environment. Names, sit, touch, easy things is what we want to be working on. And then I want to briefly talk about some do's and don'ts. These are not things we are going to solve in 72 hours. You might not even see these issues that first 72 hours. Again, my dog is not their normal selves, but I do want to talk about them briefly so everybody knows how you can start to avoid the scenarios and set yourself up for success. So resource guarding, most of us know what this is. This is when our dogs exhibit behaviors like growling, lunging, biting. Sometimes they hover or freeze over things. They'll give you that eye. But they exhibit these over resources, things they find valuable, which can be food, toys, space. It can even be people. It's also called possessive aggression. And it's something that we want that can be worked with desensitization and counter conditioning, but there's a lot we can do to prevent it from becoming a problem, especially at the beginning. So what we do want to do when we think a dog may be exhibiting some of that is we do want to eliminate any risk of it continuing, or if we think it's there. So we want to make sure that we're feeding in a crate, that the crate's in a safe location, that they're fed separately from other dogs. We want to avoid in that first 72 hours, avoid offering any high value items. Let's just stick with eating. And we want to slowly introduce those toys, okay? We do want to make trades if our dog has something that we're concerned they might be exhibiting some guarding behaviors from. This is simply an exchange. Hey, I will give you a piece of filet mignon if you will hand that back to me, okay? We don't want to take it away from them, so we want to make that trade. We do want to watch body language really closely. We want to learn to recognize any signs our dogs might be giving that something is valuable to them, and we need to pay attention to that. So it could just be very slight. It could be a slight freeze. It could be just a slight turn of their head. It could be an averted body. It could be actually picking up the toy and walking.
Okay, we lost video or audio again. Hold on.
Audio's out again. Okay.
There it is. It's back now.
Sorry. So hopefully I left off with the observing the body language.
Yes.
Okay. So the last thing we also do want to do is make sure that the entire family is on board, that we have a plan for if and when we see concerned body language. Okay. So this means kids come and get mom and dad, and that we do trade for items. We don't take them away. And the things we don't want to do is we don't, as I said, want to forcefully remove any items if our dog is growling or upset about them. Again, we can make a trade. We can do a Hansel and Gretel, which is a little treat trail with our items out of the room so that our dog has to hover up the treats, leaving behind the item that we would like to get. We can distract them with a walk maybe, or keys to go for a car ride if they like those, but we really want to avoid at all costs forcefully removing that item. We don't want to punish our growl. Remember, growling is a way a dog communicates. And if I take away that form of communication, they will only communicate differently with me, which is generally a bite, and I don't want that. And I don't want to continue to give them anything that they may have displayed some type of guarding behavior, even if I'm not sure it was guarding behavior. We just don't want to give it back to them until we get to know them a little bit better and can build a plan. For our separation distress, and I know this is a big one, we see this a lot, and certainly even with our dogs due to COVID, this is when our dogs exhibit panicked behaviors, barking, howling, destruction, eliminations, drooling, self-harm even, when they are left alone. So we've already talked a lot about some of the do's in our previous slides. We do want to be doing some training from the get-go that helps our dogs understand when we leave the home, we come back. We do want to be practicing those independent exercises. And the other thing we want to do is teach confidence games. We want to teach the dogs they can go and do things without us. Find It is a great game because it sends the dogs away from us to find a reward. Scent searches, similar to nose work, all of those would be great to play. The things we don't want to do in that first 72 hours is we don't want to overshower our new fosters. I know we want to love them and hug them, but we also want them to learn to be able to do things on their own. We don't want to punish that dog for any behaviors that they have if we do have to leave them, or accidents they have if we have to leave them for a short period of time, right? That's a situation we need to revamp, think about strategies, how we left, how long are we gone, what can we do differently next time? We don't want to make a big fuss out of arrivals and departures if we do have to leave. And we really, really, really don't want to leave our dog for extended periods of times, right? This is the time frame to get to know your dog. Commit it. Spend it with them for those 72 hours. Get to know them. Let them get to know you. Lastly, leash reactivity. We also have a webinar on this on our Good Pup website. Check it out. It was a roundtable discussion. It was terrific. But leash reactivity is when our dogs overreact to stimulus on leash. And those stimulus can be other dogs. It can be people. It could be cars. And the overreaction can be anything from jumping, lunging, snarling to biting the owner, nipping on the owner. I think this is a very common one that we see, and one that a lot of people don't know that they have until they get that dog home. So again, couple of do's we want to be doing, or do's that we're going to follow in the first 72 hours are going to be find and matching some good walking equipment for our dog. So do we need a martingale collar? Do we need a harness? Do we need a head halty? Let's check those out. Let's try them on. Let's see how our dogs respond inside the home, in our yard, on the driveway. We want to establish a familiar walking path. We talked about this a bit. So this is going to be the path that the dog goes down to eliminations maybe, but it should be the same path all the time initially, in short, right? So that the dog knows, I know coming up at this corner is going to be that dog I don't like, right? And we're helping them by letting them get prepared, taking away some of that anxiety, and then we're going to avoid it too. But we also want to get to know their walking skills. So practice when you're practicing, when you're trying things on. Do they pull on the leash? Do they heel? Do they know what heel means? Are they tucked right beside you? Are they running all between your feet? Get to know them so that we can build a plan and help them walk on a leash, and then ultimately help them with that reactivity on the leash. The things we don't want to do those social walks, right? If we know that that dog down the way isn't very nice, we don't want to go there. And we don't want to go where everybody's taking all their dogs. And we don't want to set an expectation that we can't meet, right? We're getting to know our dogs, guys. They're not going to be perfect. We're not perfect, right? And as much as I say, don't set an expectation for them, don't set one for yourselves as well. This is an opportunity to get to know them. We don't have to have that expectation that everything has to go right and perfect the first time. And lastly, we don't want to be using any aversive equipment. Adding a choke collar, a pinch collar to a situation to try and solve any problems is not going to get us where we want to be. It often can make our behaviors worse. What we really want to do is get to know our dogs, help them learn how to focus on us, and then we can build a plan for working with them and training them more. So hopefully some of those do's and don'ts will help that first 72 hours of getting your dog home. I went as fast as I could. I'm sorry I ran over everybody, but I hope you took away some good insight from that first 72 hours, New Dog in a Nutshell, how to set them up correctly so that you can, have that successful transition. I know adopting rescue dogs can be challenging. I've of all my dogs, I've only ever had one that wasn't a rescue. But I also know that despite that dog's history and their previous experiences with rescue dogs, they're really resilient. And I know with the right support and the right training and the right love from their new family, they're ready to bounce back. So thank you guys for joining us. Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, everyone. And Kate had some audio issues and I had some weird mouse clicky issues. So Kate, I was not as timely on my my slide presentation. So apologies to everyone for some of the little insane clicking. I swear I was paying attention. So thank you so much, everyone. Sounds like people really enjoyed that. There is one question I wanted to ask you, Kate. Before I do that, I just want to mention too, that if you are interested in working with Good Pup with your shelter and you aren't already doing that, please go to our website, goodpup.com/shelters, or email us at shelters@goodpup.com. All of our information, affiliate program, scholarship program, and the webinar series are there for you to check out. So please do that. And if you're jumping off, have a great night. The one question that we did have was about the training the dog to be comfortable with you leaving, like the keys, opening the door, etc. And the question was, would you be training with leaving the home, keys, handle, opening, all at once, or over the course of the 72 hours, increasing the stimulus?
Great question. Yes. So I was going very fast and I had lots of details that I was not able to include. So yes, you would start with one small stimulus and work with that one for a while before you added a second one. And I would not add the second one until I was having success with the first one. So for me, I would wait until I could walk out my door with my keys for 30 seconds successfully, and my dog didn't care, didn't get off the couch, no biggie, before I added another stimulus. And when I added another stimulus, I'm actually going to take away my keys. I'm going to start with the purse, if that was the stimulus. And I'm going to work through the purse. And then once I can do the purse for 30 seconds, I'll add them back together. So great question. Yes. And that is not a game I will play with, again, with any dog that I know has a history of separation anxiety related behaviors. We want to format things a little bit different and be a little bit more cautious. But if a dog does not have a history, it's a great way to just start to train them to be comfortable for when you leave and that expectation that you're coming back.
Awesome. Sounds like that question was answered. There's a couple things. Richard Van O's also asked a couple questions or provided some feedback that I thought was interesting. One thing was about introducing the dogs, bringing them into the house. He suggested, you could even, your job is to make the dog feel safe and advocate for the dog. So bringing them in a place where they feel safe, even in the crate, and let the excitement of the other dogs settle before there's any sort of introduction. So I thought that was important, again, to highlight. And another one, I'm not sure I understand this. So if Richard's on the phone, he can add a little bit more color, but he did say during the dog introductions, sometimes throwing the treat behind a shyer dog to remove the pressure of approaching and avoiding eye contact. Just incorporating treats into the introduction, I believe, is kind of his thought. But if that's not right, Richard, please chat in as I was trying to answer and read and pay attention and click all at the same time.
No, that's a great idea, using the treat retreat game to do that. And I do that a lot. I get really cautious with dogs and people and timing and treats. And treats in general when I'm working with dogs, right? Especially as you get closer to dogs, because I don't want that to complicate issues as well. But that's a great way to take that social pressure away.
Excellent. I think that was it. I think everyone, again, this will be recorded. And here's Lauren. Do you see that question?
Yes, with the separation anxiety?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting field these days. And I will tell you that I do a lot of research with, oh gosh, I'm going to slaughter her name, Marlena DiMartini. She's kind of the guru of separation anxiety. But what I will tell you we're finding with research, and not even just through her, is that sometimes focusing so much on desensitizing the dog to the cues is actually causing them to be more sensitized to it. To pay more attention to it rather than working on just departing from the home. having success with that, and then slowly incorporating the cue back in as an actual signal. Yep, I'm departing. But you have to work the departure first. And again, that the difference with that is that the dog you're referencing sounds like they have some form of separation anxiety related behaviors. So my approach would be a little more cautious as far as how we planned that versus a dog that did not. But yeah, it's very interesting that the evolution of the desensitization with cues of separation anxiety, but they are finding that they don't not focusing on the cues is having more success, and rather focusing on just the departure and having success, and then you bring the cues back in. So great question. I hope I answered that.
Jay's added to the giving some object with your scent on it can really help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Another great way to look at. Yeah, Lauren, look her up. She's got a ton of online courses you can take. She lectures all the time. In fact, I just did one with Grisha Stewart's group where she actually, I haven't had a chance to watch it, but she just focused specifically on separation anxiety with rescue dogs. And I signed up because I'm intending to incorporate that information into our webinars. So hopefully you can come back and get it from here too if you don't find it directly from her. I'm going to look it up because I want to spell it correctly, and I'll type it into chat to everybody. Give me 2 seconds. There it is. And I'll just copy and paste it in. And then you guys look her up. She's terrific. She also actually has a program now as well. Anybody interested in joining? So Melina DiMartini is her name. She's kind of the guru of separation anxiety these days. That's all she does. That is all she focuses on. And she actually has a training program as well that you guys can go through. It's an online program. You don't actually have to be there live. It's a terrific program, and you actually become a certified separation anxiety trainer. We actually have a couple of trainers here at Good Pup now who have that certification. So we use their knowledge as well when we're doing things.
Thank you so much, Kate. And any other questions before we log off? Keep in mind that if you have questions after or something comes up and you want to ask additional questions, Kate will answer anything that comes into shelters@goodpup.com as well. So feel free to comment to us anytime. We're here to help. And this has been great. So I'm going to stop the sharing. I'm going to stop the recording. And I hope